Hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Simon Field and I'm the sales director or a sales director here at Big Change. Welcome to today's live tutorial on stock and equipment, and this is the intermediate version, which hope you will find very useful. Once again, just like this morning, which many of you attended, because of the number of attendees for this event, it won't be possible to answer questions individually. I will be answering some of your questions at the end of the session, which have been picked from those received, as well have some questions in mind for the end of the session, and please use the chat facility to send those messages across throughout. I really hope you enjoyed today's tutorial and find it useful. Okay, so the tutorial this afternoon will follow on obviously from this morning's, and we're going to go through the following topics. So we touched on creating stock and equipment this morning. I'm going to really focus initially on the purchasing element. So I'm going to explain how a piece of equipment can be purchased from a supplier and then booked into a stock ready to be used on a job or for a customer. So I will go through the creation of a purchase order, and then I will go through the cost price, and I'll explain how these can be set for an individual customer or an individual supplier. I'm then going to move forward to worksheets on pieces of equipment. So I'm going to explain how these are created and demonstrate their use further on within the demonstration. And I'm going to explain how we can use conditional branching to use pieces of equipment to ensure that the engineers are made aware of what they need to be using on a job or what they need to be maintaining on a job. And if they do use pieces of equipment or stock from their vehicle, it will push them to the right part of the device whilst they're on a job, making their life easier. Then I'll talk about adding stock and equipment to a job, which comes into a variety of parts. So that's adding parts to a job that need to be taken to a site and brought back. So that might be if the engineers need to use a piece of equipment that you own in your business, they can take it to site and bring it back. They can complete a job on a customer's asset. So then in this case, the piece of equipment will already be on site and left at that location. And then I'll go through an example with a worksheet attached to that individual piece of equipment. And then I'll explain about removing pieces of equipment from site. We touched on quantity levels this morning. I will go through that. And finally, I will go through adding a part to a piece of equipment. So for example, this allows you to understand if batteries are part of a bigger piece of equipment. We'll be able to understand what items are on it, when they're inputted, when they're installed, etc. And finally, we'll go through we'll touch on some of the financials of using stock and equipment on a job before going forward to a Q&A at the end of the session. So I'm just going to go into JobWatch now. So further to this morning's session, in which I demonstrated how we create a piece of stock and equipment, I'm going to begin today's session, of this afternoon's session, by discussing how we purchase a piece of equipment that is going to be used on a job. For the purpose of the tutorial today, I'm going to be using fire and security products throughout, namely fire extinguishers and potentially CCTV cameras. However, please be aware that this works exactly the same way for any piece of equipment that may be relevant to your industry or business, whether it's plumbing and heating, whether it's transport and logistics, whether it's haulage, whether it's roller shutter doors. This system works in the exact same way. So to begin with, I'm going to go into CRM, and I'm going to go into a contact. Alison School, I'm sure some of you may be aware of me using this in sales demonstrations. So we're going to create a purchase order for an item that we're going to have delivered to our stores, which will then need to be booked onto a job for one of our engineers to install or use on site. So in order to create a purchase order, we must go into CRM and select a contact and go into this financial tab here like so. So we'll go into this add button here, and we must select that the document type that we are producing is a purchase order. As you can see, there are three different items that we can add. We can add an item, which will be a free text item. We can add predefined items, and we can add stock. Now, the first two elements, my colleague Charlie will be going through next week in our more in-depth financial live tutorial, which you're more than welcome to sign up to. But for the purpose of today, I'm going to select stock. So when I select stock, we can see it asks us for a make and model. Now, for those of you who attended this morning's session, you'll have seen that I created a Hikvision CCTV camera. So we put that in here like so, and we've got a number of different types of Hikvision cameras that we work with, that we purchase, that we maintain. I'm going to select this one here at the bottom, which is the example I used this morning. When I input this in, it then asks us which supplier are we purchasing this from. And we can see we have a drop-down list. Again, this goes back to when I created the item this morning. I suggested that there are two suppliers that we purchase this particular piece of equipment from, both with different prices and both with different warranties. I'm going to select the first one here, Allerton School CCTV, and select Add. And we can see the cost price here is automatically inputted in because this is something we created. Now, if we are aware that we've got a discount, we can go in and change it. But for the purpose of today's demonstration, I'm going to just select this cost price that we're given here, like so. We then scroll down and we can see the series. And once again, where there's a star, that's a mandatory field. So the system simply will not allow us to save this purchase order until this question has been answered. So I'm going to select from the drop-down list here. We can see our PO series that we've created. And once again, this is created in the back office when we set up the system. So I'm going to select, just for our example, I'm going to select that it's hardware, and then we can choose a template. Once again, that's just a look and feel of how the purchase order will come out. We can then put the supplier in. So again, we'll put in Allerton School CCTV, and we can then choose where is this item being delivered to. Now, there might be some examples where you're purchasing a piece of equipment to be delivered to an engineer's home. It might be delivered to the site that you're actually working on, where you're installing or maintaining this piece of equipment. Or alternatively, it might just be purchased for your stores. Now, purchase orders can be used against a specific job. So you're purchasing an item to be used on a specific job. Or alternatively, you might just be purchasing a piece of equipment or a number of items for just to be held in your stores at any one point. And I'm going to say here it's being delivered to CB Demo Allerton School. We can then add in additional fields if required, and I'm going to save that purchase order like so. So the purchase order then sits here like so, and then that can be downloaded and it can be emailed out to the supplier from the system, and I'm not going to go through that in too much detail today. We're going to imagine that it's been sent to the supplier, so we can see it's been created, it's been sent. The items have now been received. Once they've been received, we will click that the delivery's occurred, and we'll mark it as received. And once again, we can see when everything's been received. We can go into this purchase order, and this is what we were expecting to receive. So on this PO, we were purchasing, for simplicity, we were purchasing one Hikvision CCTV camera. We can then go into stock, and we can see that the planned items for this delivery was one Hikvision CCTV camera, and it's costing us £45. We can then see, right, this is what we're expecting, and this is what's being received. If we know the serial number for the item, we can simply put that in here like so, or alternatively, we can ask the system to generate us a unique serial number. So I'm going to confirm that, and we can then see that this camera has come from Allerton School CCTV, who is our supplier, and it's now been delivered to Allerton School like so. So if I now go into that school and go into Hikvision, we can see that we now have one in stock, and that's the one we were expecting. We can go in, we can change it to equipment at this point, but we can now see that it's at the school, and then we can fill in those fields. As I mentioned earlier in this morning session, we can add in additional custom fields if required. So we can then save that, and that piece of equipment is now on that site here, like so. So I'm going to come back to this shortly and discuss how we can then allocate a piece of equipment to a job. But for now, I'm going to go back into my account, which is where we were this morning for a lot of the demonstration this morning, to discuss further functionality that I believe will be very useful to how a number of companies will use the system throughout. So if I go into my account and administration, we often it's often required for engineers when they go to a site that they need to fill in a number of worksheets. Now, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware of the ability to create a worksheet, but these can be used for a variety of different reasons. So whilst some worksheets might be used to be answering questions on a job generically, for example, a risk assessment will cover the whole job, there might be worksheets or workflows that are required to be answered by the engineer on the particular types of equipment that they are servicing. So for example, if we imagine an engineer is going to site and we've asked them to maintain one CCTV camera and one fire extinguisher, both on the same job, the risk assessment will cover them for that whole job. However, it's very different questions that are required for us to answer, for the engineer to answer on that specific job, on that specific piece of equipment, sorry. So if we go into a piece of equipment, for example, again, we'll use a Hikvision, and we'll take this one here, we can see that the ability to add a worksheet to fill in, there's two worksheets if the movement's okay and if it's not okay. So if it's there as expected, there might be a specific worksheet to fill in. If it's not expected and we have to remove it, there might be another worksheet to fill in. So if you aren't aware of how to create worksheets, please contact Road Crew or use our help center, or contact me after this meeting. I can go into this. But we can see we've got a number of worksheets. We've got a lot of worksheets in our demonstration site, but there are a number of worksheets that that we've got within our system. Now, if we wanted to answer a specific worksheet on this particular piece of equipment, for example, it's a CCTV install, we can set it up so that this particular item, when the engineer's on a job, they're answering questions that are specific to that, either that because it's a CCTV camera, or alternatively, like you can see, we can go down to a certain level. So if, for example, all Hikvision cameras required certain questions to be filled in comparison to other cameras, we can also do that as well and really go down to a granular level of detail. Okay. So furthermore, I'm going to go back to a question that I received at the end of this morning session. And I was asked about how an engineer can be made aware of what particular piece of equipment they need to be servicing on that job. Now, I will touch on this again shortly, but what we've got is the ability to add conditional branching to a worksheet. And what that can do, so for example, if I go through to a fire extinguisher job, like so, we can see we've got a question here which says, are there any assets on site? And of course, you can define your own. And what we've got the ability to do is, if the answer is equal to yes, it will push the engineer through to stop, which is really, really useful functionality to ensure that the engineers are really, their lives are made as simple as possible, so they're made aware of what particular pieces of equipment they need to service on each individual job that they are doing. So I'm now going to move forward to using stock and equipment and jobs, and how this is seen and used on the mobile device. So initially, I'm going to use an example where an engineer needs to use some consumables on a job. And we're aware that the engineer needs to use consumables. The back office are aware, and so they tell the engineer that they need to take with them a number of consumables. to that job. So if I go into the schedule here like so, and I select new job, from here, we can type in the name of the contact. As you're aware, we can put in the name of the contact of where we're going to do that job, and we can put in the job type. So I'm just going to say it's a 4-hour SLA job. Again, you'd have your bespoke job types created in the system. To ensure that we're allocating the right stock to that job, what we're going to do is we're going to say, for this particular job, the stock item will be brought to job and left at location. And because we're aware that consumables are needed for this job, we might have purchased them for this particular job, or we might be aware that we're holding things in stock at the moment. And we're going to say we've got two options where it's being picked up from. So the engineer who's doing this job, are they picking up from one of their colleagues? Or alternatively, are they picking up from a specific location, potentially your stores? So if I say it's being picked up from the stores, Allerton School, and we're picking up some general screws, like so, it's asking us how many are we taking. Let's say we're taking 15, and we are going to charge a customer for these. So I'm going to select add like so. In fact, I'm just going to change where this job's being done to Big Change Limited, but we can still see the stock that's required. I'm then going to say the job is being completed today at 3:30, and we're going to give it to my resource, Simon James, and we're going to schedule the job here like so, and the job now sits in the system like so. So moving forward to my device, if you just bear with me 1 second. So I'm just going to go through to our SOTI, which mirrors the device that I'm looking at. So what we're going to do is we're going to see when the device is turned on. If you just give me 30 seconds there, apologies for this. Sorry about this delay. Just having some technical issues here. Okay, so apologies for the delay there. Hopefully you can all see my device here like so. So as we can see, the engineer's logged in, and we can see the job has been allocated to me like so. So we go onto this job, and we can see when we select it and we accept that job, we can then start traveling to that job. Now, before I travel to that job, the system has picked up that specific items are needed for that job, but were not found in my van. So the system will prompt the engineer that they need to go and collect those items for that particular job. So we can see here, those items are needed for the job, but were not found in your van. If I select this stock button here, it will then take me into this screen here, and it will show me that these are what I need to be picking up and where it's from. So we can see it's being picked up from Allerton School for the job at Big Change Limited at 3:30. Now, this is prompting the engineer before they set off to the job. We also have the ability, which I will show you shortly. So if we pick up those, we can say that the engineer has gone to Allerton School and they've picked up those screws as expected. The system does say, are you sure you're picking up this item now? Because it knows I'm not currently at Allerton School, and so I'm just going to select yes. Now, obviously, we want to avoid the situation where an engineer is going job by job and isn't aware of what they need. So what we've got the ability to do is, if I go into van stock, we can see there's got a tab here for today's job stock. So it shows us, so I'll just let it load. It shows us all of the items that are needed for that particular day. So the engineer can go in at the beginning of the day and they can say, right, for today, I need 15 general screws. They need to be picked up from Allerton School, etc., etc., so that they can plan in advance for what they need. So just going back into this job here, the engineer will be traveling to site like so. When they arrive on site, they'll press start job. For this job, we can then go into the stock that's required. Now we can see that for this job, the engineer needs to be dropping off 15 general screws. If I select this drop off button here, it then asks me how many am I dropping off. And we can put in either potentially we're dropping off all 15, or alternatively, we actually only needed 13 on that job. So the engineer puts in 13, they click OK. Again, it says, are you sure you're dropping them off? We are going to say yes. And we can see that 13 have been used on that job. The engineer can then sign off that job like so and complete that job like so. So now that job's been completed, we can then see within the engineer's stock if we can then see at the site that the stock has been depleted. So if we look for general screws, we can see that there's been a movement of them like so. So we can see that 15 were taken by Simon James at Allerton School, and he's used 13 of them. We can then go into that person's vehicle as well and see that it's been updated here like so, and it's been reduced here as well. So if I move back to that job here, we can then go into this job and we can see the detail of it, the general screws. We can see, right, there was 15 planned to be used on that job, and we can now see that it's got an orange square next to it, and that shows us that only 13 were actually used, so 2 will now remain on the vehicle. Now, that ensures that maybe you allow your engineers to keep the spare 2 on the vehicle, or alternatively, you might require them to bring them back. If you do require to bring them back, we'll go through that shortly as well, so they can drop off some items as well. So if I go to financial now, we can then see how that pulls through. So at the end of the job, and this again, Charlie will go through this next week in a bit more detail, but we can see on this job here, we'll ignore the top line, that's just the labour rate, but we can see we sold 13 screws. The cost price of these is 30p, and we sell them for £2 each. And we can then see the gross amount with the VAT is included as a line item at the end of the job, and that can be added onto the invoice if required as well. So just going back to the system. So we can now, going back to the device, we can now see that the engineer has a number of different pieces of equipment and stock on their device. Now, if you did require the surplus stock, I already had some screws on my van, by the way, just to let you know, but if we did require the surplus stock to be taken back, when the engineer gets back to location, what they can do is they can press drop off, and they can say, what are you dropping off? We're dropping off, where are you dropping off, sorry? We're dropping off at Allerton School. Like so. And how many are we dropping off? We're dropping off 32. We'll click OK. Again, it asks us, are you sure you're dropping these items off? We select yes. And then once again, it will create a stock movement to ensure that you've got live visibility of the quantity levels of stock and where everything is located at any one point. So that's sort of going through consumables. Non-consumables, there's a variety of different ways that we can use the system, which I'm going to move forward to now. So once again, I'm going to create a new job where we're going to assign a task or a maintenance against a particular piece of equipment for an engineer to do on a job. So if I select this new job button here, and once again, we'll put in the contacts. I'm going to use Allison School as a demonstration. We can then go to stock and equipment. And for this job, rather than taking it to the job and bringing it back or leaving it there, what we're going to do is it's going to be already on site and left at location. Because as I mentioned before, we already have a record of what our customer assets, assets our customers have on their site. So as we can see, it's going to be already on site and left at location. It then allows us to understand and see what does this customer have. Now we can see this customer has a large number of items. I'm going to go to the foam 3-litre fire extinguishers. I'm going to add, for this job, we're maintaining this individual piece of equipment, as we can see here. So we're not selling it, we're servicing it. We can then put the job type in. So I'm going to use one of my job types. We can then say, when's the job taking place once again? It's 12 o'clock today, and we're going to give it to Simon James. We're going to save that job, and we're going to see that job on the device here like so. So the job has been allocated, it sits there like so, and we can then see a job has been assigned to you once again at Allison School. So the engineer will go into their jobs, and we can see we've got a fire extinguisher annual service at Allison School. They can go into that job, and in this, once again, in the same way, sorry about the delay between my device and what you can see, but the engineer can then accept the job, travel to site, and then once they've arrived on site, of course, they'll start the job. On the job, we can see here, we've got the workflow that the engineer needs to complete. So once we select that workflow like so, we can see there are a number of different questions. And once again, these questions are generic to the job in general. This isn't associated to a particular piece of equipment at the moment. So we can see the first question is, are there any assets on site? Now, if the engineer presses yes, and once again, obviously you can bespoke these, and if you require any training or support on how you can bespoke and improve some of your current worksheets, please feel free to speak to Row Crew after this webinar. So we can see the first question is, are there any assets on site? Now, I've created what's called conditional branching behind this question. And when I select yes, it will push me through the planned stock or equipment that I need to be servicing on this particular job. And we can see there's a foam 3-litre, there's a unique identifier, and we can see we've got some custom fields. So once again, at the beginning of this demonstration, sorry, at the beginning of this morning's demonstration, I discussed custom fields on the pieces of equipment, and this is where we're able to see them. And once again, you can define these, you can bespoke these based on the type or the number of equipment that you service. So we can see, we can put a location in, the kitchen, and this is just data that we want to record about that particular type of equipment. So we can add these, we can amend them like so, and we can then save it. Those custom fields are just extra detail to ensure that the engineer has as much detail as required about the pieces of equipment that they are servicing or maintaining. So now the engineer is doing some work on each particular piece of equipment. We can see that they are confirming that the piece of equipment is there. The next button that we see is worksheets. Now, this goes back to the worksheets that I've assigned against this particular piece of equipment. So rather than answering questions on a job generically, we want to know specific information about this particular item. So if I select worksheets, we can see that there are a number of questions. And obviously, once again, you can define these questions yourself. These are just here for demonstration purposes. Is it still there? is there any damage on it, etc., etc. So now I've done all of the pieces of equipment that I was expected to do on that job. I can then go into the other pieces of equipment that I was, answer the questions on the workflow that I was answering there, like so. I'll take a picture very quickly, click OK, save it, sign it off, and then put my name on, and then obviously we can complete the job like so. So the job has now been completed. So then we can go into the office, we can go into the back office, and we can go to the job card, and we can see exactly what was done on that job through the job sheet, just like normal. And so, some of you may be aware we can also provide a job card with stock on it, so that it details each piece of equipment that was serviced on that job. So the next thing I'm going to do is using a part that isn't planned from my vehicle on a job. So what we're going to do is potentially an engineer gets to site and they need to use a part, just a generic part that they've got on their vehicle. Once again, we're going to create a job at Allerton School. It's a 4-hour SLA job. Again, we can say the job's today at 5 p.m. and we're going to give it to Simon James. On this job, the back office scheduler is unaware of any parts or equipment is going to be used on the job. So what we do is we go back into this. We can see that it's another job at Allerton School. Once again, the engineer will accept the job, they'll travel to the job and they'll start the job. And the engineer is then aware that they need to use parts on that particular job. So what they can do is they can click select use parts, and we can see these different options here. So where am I using the part from? Now in this example, I'm using it from my van on the site. So what that means is I am potentially installing, or I am taking something from my van and I am leaving it at that location. Now we do have a barcode scanner. What that can do is the engineer can go to a piece of equipment, select the scanner button here, and it's got a barcode reader, and we can go up to a piece of equipment like so that they've got in their vehicle and scan it in like so. So that will read, if you've got that piece of equipment in your vehicle, that will then read the barcode, and it will say to you, I can see that you are looking for this specific part. Alternatively, what the engineers can do, if it isn't a serialized item, they can select the type of item that they're using. So for example, I'm going to say I'm going to use 2 epoxy resins on this site. So I've typed in epoxy resin, and so there's a slight delay between like so, and they'll select that I'm adding 2. Sorry for the delay in my software here. So they've added the 2. Sorry, I'll just let it catch up. So I have added the 2, but I will show you that in the front office, the job's been completed, and then we can see it's gone green there like so, and we can once again see in the financials the epoxy resin that's been used on that particular job. So I'm going to have to just start my SOTI again. Apologies for that. Apologies for this. So the final use of stock and equipment on a particular job is when we're installing or inputting parts to a piece of equipment that we already hold on site. Now, this is quite it might be a unique scenario. What we're able to do is, once again, I'll schedule a job for We go back through to our demo site. So what we can do is we're going to schedule the job for Allerton School here like so. We're going to say, once again, it's a 4-hour SLA, and we're going to say stock item. In fact, we're not going to put a stock item on that job. We're just going to schedule it for today at 6:30 like so. So the job now sits in the system like so, and we can see it. I'll put it in there like so. Just schedule it for today, and then we can see that there's no stock that's required for that job that we're aware of. If we go back to the device, what I'm going to show you now is how the engineer will install something to a particular piece of equipment that already exists on site. So if we imagine there's a big pump station potentially, you might want to record different parts or different pieces of equipment that are associated to the bigger pump station, just as an example. So we're going to accept that job, drive to the job, and then we're going to say, go back into job stock. Now, the engineer is going to say, I am using parts from my van, and instead of selecting that I'm using it on site, I'm going to say I'm using it on a specific item. So it's going to say, what am I using? So I'm using an epoxy resin, and once again, I'm going to say, where am I using it? I'm using it on a foam 3-litre fire extinguisher, which already exists at this customer site. Sorry, if I select foam, once again, we can see it's got a list of foam fire extinguishers, like so. We'll select this is the one which is being used, and then we're using an epoxy resin. And it's going to ask us for the quantity of how many we're using. We're using 2, and then we're going to select OK. And those resins will now sit as a part against that particular piece of equipment. So if I go back to the job, I'm going to finish that job and come out of that like so. So we've finished that job like so. If I then go into the back office and go to that particular piece of equipment that I was servicing, like so, this was a particular piece of equipment that I was putting the parts on, we can then see that there's 2 epoxy resins that are installed on that particular piece of equipment. So that works as a parent. So this is the parent piece of equipment here, and then this is the children that sit beneath it. Once again, that is it's a really useful function for you to group pieces of equipment together and keep full visibility of that. So the final thing I'm going to touch on today is systems. So systems is, again, once again, is functionality to really group pieces of equipment together. So we can say, for example, you can create your own system, and we can say Allerton School fire extinguishers, and we can say these pieces of equipment are always serviced together. So this could be a number of different fire extinguishers that are associated to that building there. So what we can do, once again, is go to our schedule and select new job. If we go to Allerton School and we say it's once again it's a fire extinguisher annual service, we can see that it's now added in the systems button here, like so, which isn't usually on a particular job. So if I was to select that it's today at 10 o'clock, again we'll give it to Simon, and select the systems button here, we can type in the system that we're actually going to be working on here, and it automatically will then add all of those pieces of equipment to that job. And once again, if I select save, like so, and go back to the device once again, we can go into that job, we can accept it, we can start driving. Once again, we'll start the job. And if I go back into job stock now, we can see there is a number of different pieces of equipment that we need to be servicing on that job, all in that system. Fine, okay, perfect. So the final thing I'm going to go over today is it's touching on financials, but it's when stock is used on a job, you might have a preferred rate or an agreed rate with an individual customer. So what we can do is we go into Allerton School again, we go to financials. We've got the ability to add price lists. Now, we can see for a particular piece of equipment or all equipment, we've got the ability to say, right, for all stock or a particular piece of stock, so let's say the foam 3 litre, for example, the regular price here is £45. Now, we might give them a percentage discount of 10%, for example. And so if an engineer was to use that particular piece of equipment on a job, it will automatically be added on as a line item. It will automatically be added on as a line item with the discounted rate that we've agreed with that individual customer. So I hope you found that useful. I am now going to open up to the floor to have some questions. I'm going to go into the chat now and see what questions have already been added in so far. So the first question is, can you add multiple stock items for a van stock? Yes, so we can go when we're adding something to a vehicle, we can add in a quantity of stock items. So, for example, if we were adding 10 consumables to a vehicle, they can be added in as a quantity for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, can the barcode items be added? So the barcoding is used to understand what's currently on the vehicle at the moment. So, for example, if an engineer is using a piece of equipment from their vehicle, rather than typing it in, they can swipe in. They can just scan the barcode to understand which which asset or which piece of equipment they're going to be taking from site. Do we have any more questions that anybody would like me to go through, or anything else that I could go through on the demonstration? So we've had a question: can the engineer add stock in when they purchase it from the supplier if they are buying something on the go? Now, what the engineer is able to do is they've got the ability to either add to van, so if they're going to site and taking something, or alternatively, they can create a new item. Now, creating a new item won't actually add an invoice against that particular item, but what we can do is we can force the engineer, if they do create a new item on a job, we can remind the engineer that they need to put their expenses on or take a picture of the receipt, or even add a cost element onto the job, like so. So we've got another question: can you add items to a job without putting them into stock? So no, they have to exist in stock for us to add them onto a job. As I said, the engineers do have the ability to create new items from their device if necessary. Yes, they can then allocate it to a job if they create it. So we had a question which said, can they allocate it to a job if they create the new item? Yes, absolutely. So, okay, that's a very good question. So we've had a question which is about systems on a job. So what was it that made that field appear on the job? Sorry, I should have gone through that. That is back office functionality. So if we go to administration, on our job types, it's a button that we can press that systems will be used on the specific job type. So we can see the dishwasher maintenance test doesn't have that ticked. But if I go through to fire extinguisher annual service, we can say, yes, we use systems with this equipment, and it's fire extinguishers, and they're usually already on site and left at location. Is there any way of adding a certain markup percentage to every stock item automatically rather than individually on each contact? So we can put set prices in against stock and equipment that's used. I think you might need to clarify that question for me. Sorry. And we've had a good suggestion here that for all your barcoding needs, check out the thermalsupport.com. When equipment is sent for servicing, I assume our custom fields of location and duration will need to be opened individually for the engineer to know how much time is required on each piece of equipment. Yeah, so absolutely. It depends how you work. So if you want to allocate or kind of remind an engineer how long they need to be spending on each piece of equipment, then yes, absolutely, that could be used as a custom field, and the engineers would need to use the custom fields and look into them to see how long they should be spending on each particular piece of equipment. Yes. Is there any more questions that anybody would like me to go through? Anything else that anybody would like me to touch on? Any functionality that you'd like me to go through? So we've had a question from Robert. How would you handle a large job with a lot of bespoke items? So I guess there's two questions to that. There's two answers to that. So if there are a number of pieces of equipment that's required to be used on a job by an engineer to be allocated to a job, in exactly the same way, we could put on 500 stock items as a quantity to say, right, for this job, you're going to be using 500 stock items. When they get to the job, they can say, right, I've used 400 of them, and obviously it will leave 100. Now, if they're maintaining a number of pieces of equipment, we can use systems to add all those equipments at one point, or else, and in the same way, it will list all the pieces of equipment on the device so that the engineer has full awareness of which piece of equipment they need to be servicing at all times. Is there a setting that can be changed so the engineer can see the quantity of each stock on the van rather than having to click on it each time? Now, the engineer, just to go back onto the device, they can go into stock and they can see the quantities that they've got in, like so. But no, they will need to select it, and they can see, when they click down, they can see the quantity levels of each piece of equipment that they've got on, like so, but they will need to press this down arrow here, like so. So on your example earlier, you sent an engineer to pick up screws from the site when it turned out he already had the stock in this van. How would you avoid that? Yeah, absolutely. So when we schedule jobs, we do have full visibility over which engineers got what in at any point. So if you wanted to see, for example, what SF17 has in their vehicle before they go out, we can see, right, if we were using some food safety sprays, we know that this person, there's no point in allocating them some more food safety sprays, as you can go in at any point and use these filters here to go in and see what each vehicle is holding at any one point. Now, if you wanted to see who's holding the food safety sprays, we could go and say, put food safety spray in here like so, and we can see, right, they're on a number of different vehicles, so we might send a different vehicle to another engineer to pick up off one of their colleagues. Sorry, so I'm just going to scroll up on the questions. So we've had a question which says, can the engineers see stock in other engineer vehicles and also their storeroom? Yes, absolutely. So if we go into if we go back to the device here like so, they can literally search where a piece of stock is. So if, for example, we wanted to know where the food safety spray is, like so, we can search and it will suggest to us, like so, where the nearest food safety sprays are. So we can see these might be our stores here, like so. We can see there's 13 of those in there. Or we could pick them up from our colleague there, John Anthony, like so. We can also search which other vehicles have in at any one point. So you can put in a different vehicle registration number and search and collect the stock off them if required. We would like to start. We would like to start allocating equipment to certain jobs, as these job types require specialist equipment needed to carry out the works. Yes, absolutely. So we can say. So the question was, can we allocate specific piece of equipment to a certain job type? So yes, we can say, if we go back into the back office here like so and go to the job type, we can say the stock category concern for fire extinguisher annual services is fire extinguishers, for example, and you can choose more than one as you wish. So we've also had another question which said, if the engineer is selecting stock from one of their vehicles, will it direct them to that vehicle or to that store location? Then yes, absolutely. So if I just go back into the device, I can select this arrow button here, and then it will again load a sat nav, and it will direct me to where my colleague is or where those stores are, which is holding that stock at that point. Have we got any other questions that anybody would like me to discuss this afternoon? So we've had a question, what does the one mean? It's next to all the items, and it just allows us to select the arrow down and see the quantity levels if required. So how do we load barcodes into the system? So this really goes into so when you start using the stock and equipment, this really goes into the import of stock. So we have a stock and equipment import file using a CSV. On there, if you do already have barcodes, you can just literally import them in when you start using the system. Alternatively, you can add the barcodes to the equipment as you go. So you might use generic barcodes initially, but from the back office, you might then add them in. I mean, I've got one customer who had no barcodes on their piece of equipment when they started to use the product, and on their job sheets, on their worksheets, they would literally put on the equipment worksheet for the first year, what is the barcode, or take a picture of the barcode, and then the back office would update the barcode so that all the barcodes were absolutely correct, so that they had more accurate data. So we've been asked the question, can we add barcodes to equipment rather than stock? Yes, absolutely. And we've been asked, can we revisit where the price list for the stock is and where the price is in the first place? Yes, so when we create a stock item, we go to make and models. So again, I'm going to use a Hikvision camera this time. And when we create it, we can see what the selling price is, like so, but we can also put the cost price in from our suppliers there, like so. Do we have any more questions or any other functionality that anybody would like me to go over? I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to answer some questions, to ask some questions. So can the stock be exported to Excel? Yes, absolutely. And we've also had another question. So if we collect stock from another van, do both tablets have to update the stock records or just one of them? No. So only the engineer that is collecting the stock or equipment from their colleague will need to update it. So it will automatically it will reduce the quantity from the van which is being collected from, and add it to the van which is collecting it. So only the engineer that is collecting the piece of equipment will need to do it, or alternatively, we can drop it off as well. But only one of the engineers will need to do it. How do you update stock levels when you do a stock take? So if hopefully these stock levels would be accurate at any point anyway. Alternatively, we can go through and do a bulk upload through a CSV, or you can go through one-off items in the back office if required. So we've had a question from Robert. Can the back office add items to the job after it has been completed? Yes, absolutely. So if an engineer hasn't added the items into the job once the job's been completed, you can use back office functionality to ensure that this is completed. And how is that done? Yes, absolutely. So if I go into the schedule and go to the jobs that we've done today, so I'll select this job. And we go to financials, we can see on this job nothing was used, but we can say, right, we've actually used foam 3 litre, like so, and that will add it in as a line item, and then we can create a movement within the back office. So we can say it's moved from Allerton School, potentially. So if I moved it from the back office, and I'm going to move it to Big Change, for example, and it will ask us, it will then create a stock movement for that piece of equipment. Can the stock transfers between vans be done without the engineer having started a job? Yes, absolutely. It can be done at any point throughout the day. So it doesn't necessarily need to be on a job that's started. Yes, that will now show a stock used on the job record. On the stock record. Do you have to do both move stock and add to the job? It really depends if you want to be invoicing for that job. If you want to add it in as a line item, then yes, you will. So where do you update the barcode for items already entered? So we can go into each piece of equipment like so, and we can update the serial number as we wish, like so, or alternatively, we can do it through a bulk upload. So we're coming up to the last minute, so I hope you've all found this session very useful. If you do require any more assistance, we do have our help centre here, like so, that you can use. Of course, we've got row crew who are available to support you at any point. And if you want to direct any questions to me personally, please send me an email at simon.field@bigchange.com. Finally, if you do have any prospects or referrals that of companies that you work with, or that who you think would also benefit from using stock and equipment or other parts of the system, please send them our way, and we'd be more than happy to take those referrals and reward you on the back of it. So thank you very much.